Our National Consumer Affairs reporter Michael Atkin joins me now to help answer some of your questions. Now, Michael, a common question we get from our audience: what's going to happen to petrol prices now that the fuel excise is being cut?
Hi Gemma. Yes, people should see a difference in the coming days. So the excise is going to be cut from tomorrow, and it should take a couple of days for petrol stations to sell the fuel they have at the higher price before people start noticing a difference at the pump. That's what industry groups have been saying in the last couple of days. But, you know, it's not going to mean that the pain at the pump goes away. It might just mean that it's a little less painful. Yesterday, Treasurer Jim Chalmers said it would reduce the cost by about $19 for a 65-litre tank. So, you know, that's obviously something that will make a difference to a lot of people, but it's still really going to hurt considering how high the prices are at the moment.
Now, we had Richard from the New South Wales Central Coast write into us noting the spikes in petrol and asking, is that because of the overnight increase in the oil price? Does it flow that quickly to the pump? This is purely price gouging, he writes there. So is petrol price gouging happening? Is the ACCC doing anything about it?
A few things there. So motoring groups say there has been suspected price gouging, particularly in the early days of the war, because petrol stations were selling petrol that they'd bought at cheaper prices. And as soon as the wholesale price started to go up, then they jacked up prices quite quickly and faster than was reasonable, is what the motoring groups allege. And that particularly happened in the major cities, including here in Brisbane, where I am. So the RACQ is one of the motoring groups that made a referral to the ACCC saying that they did expect that there was potential breaches of consumer law that had occurred from a wide range of petrol stations. But I think the thing is, talking to experts, I spoke to the former ACCC boss, Alan Fells, and he said, well, price gouging in the fuel sector is not illegal. So, you know, it's poorly defined, this concept of price gouging. But if we take it to mean something like excessive profits, well, that's not illegal in this country. And so the ACCC can have a look at other areas. So things like whether anti-competitive conduct is going on. So, you know, for example, it's illegal for companies to act as a cartel where they raise prices together. But that is hard to prove. And the other thing that's illegal is misleading conduct. So if a service station raises the price immediately and blames the conflict with Iran, but they were selling the petrol that they had purchased at a cheaper price, well, that might be misleading and fall foul of the law. We know the ACCC is very active in this area at the moment. They called in the major fuel companies for a meeting to say they were watching closely. And I think what has happened is the Treasurer and the ACCC have called out poor behaviour when they've seen it. And so the industry is certainly on notice. And my colleague at the ABC, Julian Fell, has a story out today that's on the website now, which shows the movement in the retail price compared to the wholesale price. And the story says that those two prices have come back together. So in the early days of the conflict, there was a big gap and there were these allegations that price gouging might occur. And now that price gap has really narrowed and the margin is much thinner.
Now, Michael, there are a lot of questions around transparency. I'll just read a few of them out. We have this submission from Tony in St Helens in Tasmania saying, the fuel prices at the pump do not reflect the costs the wholesalers paid for fuel. We're told that currently there is no fuel shortage and there is negligible additional cost for handling and delivery. So I see no justification in the increased prices. Customers need to see a breakdown of where the excess profit is being made and by whom. We've also got this from Stephen asking, I want to know who is making the money. If the federal government and state governments are correct that there is minimal interruption to fuel arrivals till late April, how can the fuel price be so high? So there's this need for more transparency about how petrol prices are set and who profits here.
Yeah, they're great questions, and I don't think anybody would disagree with most of the sentiments in those questions. I think one thing the first person said that I might take a bit of issue with is there is an increased cost of moving that fuel around to get it to the service stations at the moment. So there may be additional costs there, and obviously there is an increased cost in getting the raw product as well. So there are increased costs at play, but you know, we all agree, I think, that there's a lack of transparency around the profit margins that are made and what other factors may be at play, because these are private businesses, in some cases very large multinational companies that control supply. And the ACCC has already issued a very unusual warning that it is investigating anti-competitive conduct by 4 of the major suppliers, multinational oil companies mostly, that are well known, for anti-competitive conduct that affected the supply of diesel to independent players in regional areas. So it's very unusual for the ACCC to mention it's investigating something. Usually we only know about something like that once a prosecution occurs. So, and I have to stress, they say it's very early days and they've come to no conclusions. But that just goes to show some of the things that might be happening below the surface that we can't see at the moment, that the regulator is worried about and the government is worried about. I would say in terms of the retail price and the wholesale price, we do actually have an incredible amount of information for that. You know, you can go on to one of the fuel apps and see the price across the country for unleaded or diesel. You can also go and see the wholesale price, and that gives you some indications of what a potential profit margin might be. But of course, there are all these commercially sensitive areas that we don't have insight into as the public that could be really at play here, that mean that companies are making more or less profit than previously. And we know from the Consumer Watchdog's reports that there are issues they're concerned about. They are concerned about 4 major companies dominating supply in Australia. They are concerned about a lack of independent petrol stations across the country, including where I am in Brisbane. There's not as many as other capital cities, which means there's less competition on price and means higher price. So I think there are really concerning issues at play here with how the private market is operating, but the government and the regulator has certainly very clearly put on notice retailers and the major companies. Some consumer groups think there should be a price gouging power in consumer law extended to the fuel area. And if that were to occur, that would give the ACCC a whole new range of powers that they might be able to use in a circumstance like this, but they can't right now.